Revenue operations is much more than words in a job title. It's a methodology that is transforming sales, marketing, and customer success teams into high-performing revenue drivers. However, many revenue leaders still have critical questions about how to operationalize it. Furthermore, they want to know what others in the industry are doing. That's why we conducted original research and put together our findings in the 2021 Revenue Operations and Customer Acquisition Benchmark Report. In partnership with RevOps Squared, we asked hundreds of cross-departmental revenue leaders across top companies to reveal their approach to revenue planning, analytics and revenue operations, and customer acquisition. We've identified exactly how teams are aligning to hit their revenue targets, as well as the new activity, pipeline, and customer acquisition benchmarks to strive for in 2021 and beyond. Download the entire report for free at ringDNA.com/RevOpsReport.
What if your sales team could know the moment a buyer arrives on your website and talk with them instantly? With Qualified's conversational sales and marketing platform purpose-built for Salesforce, that's all possible. It's not rocket science, it's common sense. Conversations move deals forward. Live chat, voice calls, and meeting bookers accelerate sales conversations without a single email exchange. Capture prospects in that magic moment when they're most interested in learning about your business. Head on over to qualified.com to chat with their team and learn more.
So the vertical axis is the confidence axis. You start with high confidence and you go down to unsure. And then the horizontal axis is the inputs, external and internal. The premise that I put in it is most of us are just given the half the map of this personal growth journey or leadership journey. So the first one is external confidence. It's the observe quadrant. You're copying basically what you've seen done. You've seen parents lead, you've seen coaches lead, you've seen teachers lead things. So when somebody gives you something to do, to lead, to have responsibility over, you just do what you've seen done. With the positive motivational speakers I listened to growing up, they would say, if you're a leader and you turn around and no one's following you, you're just out for a walk.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. That was Marc A Pitman. Marc's the CEO of the Concord Leadership Group and author of an interesting book titled The Surprising Gift of Doubt. Use uncertainty to become the exceptional leader you are meant to be. And in today's conversation, Marc and I talk about the importance of developing and embracing your personal style. I mean, this is critical for individual contributors in sales as well as sales leaders. So we dive into the choices that people have to make, whether to keep seeking for help outside yourself, listening to somebody else's system to try to solve your problems, or to finally discover what will work for you. And Marc and I dig into why you should make the choice to write the rules for yourself and determine your own way of measuring your success in sales. Now, I talk about this a lot for sellers because you need to develop your own way of selling. Of course, you'll have many influences on you, mentors, coaches, customers, books, and so on. But experiment and find the one thing that is authentic to you and that enables you to become the best version of yourself. Use what others model and teach and what you know to be true about yourself to sell. Lots of interesting perspectives on personal growth today. Make sure you stick around and check it out. Now, before we get to Marc, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. And if you subscribe, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could also give us your feedback about how we're doing with a review. We'd really appreciate it. So thank you. All right, let's jump into it. Marc, welcome to the show.
So honored to be here. Thanks, Andy.
Well, pleasure to have you here. You're joining us from where today?
Greenville, South Carolina.
Greenville, South Carolina. I have a friend that owns a family baking company not too far from there. Ever heard of Caroline's Cakes?
No, but now I'm really intrigued.
All right, we'll talk after the show.
Okay, great.
You can order a mail order. They are classic South Carolina 7-layer caramel cakes, and they are so good.
Oh, yes. They supported a conference I spoke at here. Yes, okay. Those were delicious. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So
good friend to have.
Yeah, well, this is an ad for you, Chick, my friend. Everybody listens if you want a fabulous dessert. Speaking of South Carolina, Caroline's Cakes. Get them shipped across the country. Guaranteed to put on some weight, but they're well worth it. Yes.
Add to your COVID-19.
Yeah, add to your COVID-19, exactly. Still working my COVID-19 off, by the way. Oh, gosh. Yeah. So, well, welcome. Little digression there on cakes, made me hungry, but we're going to be talking about your book today, book called The Surprising Gift of Doubt, Using Uncertainty to Become the Exceptional Leader You're Meant to Be. And yeah, the theme of the book really resonated with me, and I think will for a lot of people, which is that it's about the importance of developing your own personal style. And in order to sort of, as you said, to your own unique way of operating in the world, it's something that I'm passionate about. I write about. My next book coming out February 2022 is all about this, which is more from a sales focus, but yeah, if you want to become the best version of yourself in whatever you're doing, is you need to sort of seize the autonomy, if you will, and experiment and develop your personal style. And unfortunately, so much of sales these days is oriented towards, well, how can I make everybody else, operate and sound just like everybody else, as opposed to becoming the best version of themselves.
Well, and I think part of it's because you can manage that. So as a sales professional, if you're good at sales, usually we get good at something and then we're promoted into our level of incompetence, the whole Peter principle. So the good salespeople who are really like the sales process get into managing salespeople and aren't really good at the management part so they try to make mini-me's and try to force people into their own kind of sales outfit, which doesn't fit.
Yeah, well, it's sort of supported these days by the fact that now we have so much technology that we're able to really have more insight and transparency into the selling process, and we can sort of say, we can pick out the unique things that Jennifer does, who's our number one salesperson now. We're going to coach everybody in these specific things to be just like Jennifer, as opposed to saying, what Jennifer does is interesting. This could work for you once you experiment with that and maybe put your own spin on it, and then integrate that into your style, as opposed to this is what you need to be doing.
Well, as I've been listening to your episodes, it's been very interesting because there are so many applicable things with leadership and sales. But it reminded me of one of my favorite clients who I was hired in to train it was a $193 million a year fundraising organization. They're a nonprofit. And I had a software sales rep tell me that if you can do sales, for me as a nonprofit fundraiser, I was doing sales without giving anybody a product.
Right.
He said, at least I sell code, but at least I give them a box. So you're just giving them hopefully a good feeling. But this trainer had me come in, and it wasn't the head of the department. It was the most effective sales or fundraising manager I've ever seen. She actually coached her individuals we have outcomes that we have to hit, targets we have to hit.
Yep.
And she hadn't done that before. So there was a flexibility of adhering to the outcomes, but also letting the path to that outcome be a little bit, there were best practices and benchmarks, and they were trying to always study, but it was also allowing for the individuality, where the VP of the operation had 20 years of Xerox sales experience. And he had this amazing breakthrough 20 years in of, I don't have to force the process. I can just listen to people and I'll know when the right time is to make an ask. So he was training his brand new team. Yeah, exactly. He was training his brand new team. Hey, just become their best friend. If you're going to their fishing trips or if they're inviting you to their weddings, then you're doing your job. And my thing was, no, if you're raising money, you're doing your job.
Right. Yeah, the object is not to become their friends. And this is a particular...
Nobody needs another great friend. Usually.
Yeah, this is sort of poignant at this moment just because I posted yesterday, the day before we recorded this, on LinkedIn, because there's been there's a small cohort of sort of sales thought leaders that post that say, we're in the post-relationship age. Relationships, you don't need relationships in sales. What are you talking about? Customers don't want it. But what they do is they conflate a relationship with a friendship. And, and it's like, well, is this a generational thing? I mean, I certainly didn't grow up thinking relationships or friendships. It's the way two or more things are connected. In this case, it's people. So if you're selling to someone, you're connected to them, and thus you're in a relationship.
Do you think it's because I've heard you say so many times too that people are coming to the sales process further having done a lot of their own research. So what people thought was relationship before, they don't need the chit chat as much as they're presenting with a problem.
Well, I think it's not just chit chat, right? There's a body of science that says that small talk is important in order
Absolutely.
to build a connection with another human being. We're wired to want to be connected, so we're not repealing the law of relationship physics just because we don't want it to exist. But people, you don't want to spend an inordinate amount of time to do it, but you don't have to in order to build that connection with someone. So I think regardless of where people are coming into where sellers are engaging, whatever point in the buying process sellers are engaging, you still have to build a level of trust with someone. And so the door to trust starts with this human connection.
And not faking it. So that's where the doubt of where people start feeling like they're copying the other person, they're being inauthentic. Customers will pick up on that, and they won't necessarily know. They'll think it's their own sort of intuition of something's not right here, and they don't realize it's projected from the salesperson as opposed to being received from their own intuition or their own gut sense.
Well, but the intuition works on the part of the seller as well, right? So this is, I think, is when you talk about personal style, is part of this is your intuition, is listen to your gut, right? If you're being trained or asked to say something that you're just not comfortable with, and not that it's unethical, but it's just it's an approach that just doesn't resonate with you. You don't feel it aligns with what your personal style is. Listen to your gut. Do it differently. That's the thing I keep stressing and this is why I think so many sales managers these days do a disservice to people by trying to make them conform to a specific process or way of doing things that's so detailed oriented as opposed to saying, here's the general framework of the process. We do have these best practices, but the goal is to help you become, as I said, the best version of yourself within that process. And you have to listen to your gut.
And I think part of it's what makes it particularly messy is it's not just your personal preference. You may not like saying something. I just was talking, one of my clients had gone into financial sales and financial services, and he loved talking financial services. He didn't like feeling forced to then close a deal. And he would have been, so I think part of it's learning a new habit. If you're in a sales position, there are going to be some things that you need to learn to say your own way, but you don't just not say it because it's,
you still need to do the job.
Right. Yeah. So, and that's one of the things, whenever I do trainings for staff, whenever I talk about different personality assessments or something, I always end it with, we're in an artificial construct here in an organization. You were brought into this organization to do a job. So just because it doesn't feel comfortable doesn't necessarily mean you're off the hook from, whether it's cleaning toilets or doing whatever else. There's still things that have to get done.
Yeah, but this idea of personal style, though, is one, again, that I think is so important, and one that I write and talk about a lot. And it's I was just having this conversation with somebody before you and I hopped on this, is I think part of the issue is that increasingly in businesses, we assume, well, we've always done this, we've always assumed, but now the assumption is now, it's creating worse problems than perhaps in the past, is we assume that let's say salespeople, there's a certain amount of this, we're talking about this just basic interpersonal skills that need to exist in order to have a long-term career in sales, is we assume people know how to do those things, right? We assume that, and let's take example. Dan Pink talks in his books To Sell is Human that 3/4 of white-collar workers have some responsibility for getting work done through other people. I mean, they have to influence other people to get their job done.
Right.
That, for me, it boils down to some simple core human skills that you need to have in order to do that. But we assume people have those. And so we bring people in and we onboard them into a process and go do these things, and we are completely unmindful of the fact of whether they know how to build rapport, whether they know how to just basic connect with another human being, whether they know how to show interest in another person, empathy, all these things.
Curiosity, yeah, right.
And it seems like we need to sort of reorient, as leaders, need to reorient how we train people.
Well, and that's where you saw part of my story was I had homework from being in school, and then my parents gave me homework because I was a Pitman. And
Yeah,
it
which
was really,
sounded horrible, by the way, but yes.
oh, it did, didn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry for all the kids of people that are listening to me that are like, I wish I had learned those social skills. But my parents are going through the same sort of, I wish I had learned how to, Dale Carnegie, how to win friends and influence people, how to have good conversations, how to have tough conversations, how to set goals. I wished I had learned that when I was in high school. So they just started assigning it to my sister and myself, and we thought it was normal. And I was glad when I get to college, though, because it was sort of, it was a vocabulary I understood. And yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, people sometimes ask me, okay, well, so what's the root cause of sort of bad selling, right? But you strip away everything else, and to me, it oftentimes comes down to failure on these sort of core human skills, the ability to connect with someone, your innate curiosity, to be interested in other people, empathy, so on. Is, to your point, I say, well, yeah, the big cause is bad parenting.
That's what one of the things. Whenever I hear a speaker kind of dump on a particular generation, I'm Gen X, so we get dumped on. Millennials and Gen Z, I guess, are the next to get dumped on.
I know you Gen Xers are horrible. Yes,
I know we are. Yeah, in fact, we just saw a chart. Our one of our kids was giving us a hard time, and my wife found a chart on a TV show that showed all four generations, and it was silent boomer, millennial, Z. There's no Xers in there. It was really funny. but what amazes me is whatever generation is usually doing the insulting on the younger generation is the one that parented that generation. So it's just the seeds that were sown from the parenting.
Well, but yeah. Well, in my case, one of the things my parents did extremely well, I mean, they had a great childhood in general, but one of the things they did deliberately is they put us into social situations with adults when we were kids, where we had to connect with them. We had to speak with them as almost peers, right? Regardless, even though there's mismatched social status between a kid and an adult.
Sure.
And they put us into those social situations so that I felt that, like, when I started entering the workforce, I didn't know this at the time. As years later, I sort of looked back and said, "Oh, wow, okay, that was really smart." I was prepared. Even though my first year in sales, I looked like I was 12 and was going out trying to sell.
That's why I have a beard, because it made me a little less young looking. People couldn't place me.
Those weren't allowed back in the day when I was doing it.
That's true.
But yeah, I mean, it was. I think that's what got me through. Is I was able to sit down with someone and have, CEO of a company, and have a conversation. And initiate a conversation and engage in, connect, engage in a little bit of small talk, but just enough to, get to the point. I think that got me through the first couple of years where I fundamentally felt hugely uncomfortable doing everything else associated with the job. But
did your parents do that intentionally, or was that just natural to them?
I think it was intentional, right? I mean, I think we used to think what they were doing was showing us off when we were kids, right? Because, wow, they're smart. They engage well with adults.
At one point, I was doing that, and I got my kids. I said, "Okay, listen, I just realized what I did to you." They were really young. I said, "I'm treating you like a trained SEAL. So the next time I do that to you, you have every right to start waving, clapping your arms, and going or, because I need to be called out on that. That's not fair."
But in retrospect, there was obviously some showing off, but it was mostly just, I think they were teaching us a life skill.
Well, the reason I asked is that when we found out we were pregnant, my wife and I, with our first now 21-year-old, we started interviewing. I guess it's a Franklin Covey habit to begin with the end in mind. We looked at all the kids. We were living in a boarding school campus, and we looked at all the kids we enjoyed, and then we decided to interview their parents. What rituals did you have? What books did you read? Right. And part of it was the pressure of my own having been assigned other texts. So I remember asking one couple, what books did you read? And they looked at each other like it was the most foreign thing. And then after a long pause, they looked back at us relieved. They said, "Oh, Tolkien, Lord of the Rings was really good." Uh, the Chronicles of Narnia, we really enjoyed, which was not. I mean, everybody else was parenting this and funding, goal setting that. So it was really relieving. But it was, I think, one of the things we noticed was the kids that we liked also had been around different generations, were able to talk with the generations instead of just talking with their cohort.
Right.
So.
Well, I think it's again back to this idea. We're assuming that Gen Zs and millennials coming into the workforce have these skills is and this is not a criticism by any stretch of imagination, but the technology is that they're messaging. They're not having conversations, and as much as we did, right? Yeah. They're not spending hours on the phone like we were doing when we were kids. And get off the phone. I mean, it's probably been 30 years since any kids ever heard a parent say that, right?
Yeah. We were just joking this week with a friend of mine. I said, did you ever have that one phone in the middle of the house with the super long cord that got really kinked up because it was stretched too much? And he got it too. But yeah, now. Yeah.
Well, we had that when I was growing up, but yeah.
Yeah, growing up.
We had cordless phones. That was such a great innovation. But the point being is that the conversations they're having are message based and sort of not verbal in the same way that they need to be when they come into the workforce. So again, why do we assume, in terms of helping these people develop a personal style, why do we assume that they even have the basic skills, right? And so we hire these kids.
And again, I know that you're saying this, but I want to make sure that people hear this is not an insult at all. This is you're just stating something that is.
Well, it's a shortcoming that we have as organizations and as corporations is instead of dumping on other generations, let's enable them. Let's give them the tools. Let's not assume, because the world has changed dramatically in terms of the way they communicate and the relationships they build when they're growing up. And we're asking them to do something completely different that they have no experience doing on multiple dimensions when we bring them into sales as newbies.
Yep. That's really good. That's why I find that I don't know if you found this to be, I actually do, because I've listened to you and read your stuff, but the personality assessments and all, part of what I love about them is if they're not used to constrict or to get people, they're not used to get people off the hook or to limit their potential, but if they're used well, they can be a common language of seeing, other people see the world differently than me. So when you're training a new person, they might not realize that other people aren't all facts driven. Mm-hmm. They want to talk about their kids, or they don't want to talk about their kids, and it doesn't mean they're not interested in you. They just they're calling you or talking to you to get a task completed. And so let's complete the task with them.
Right. Well, let's dive into the thing about assessments, because when you laid out your 4 quadrants of leadership growth, it's really personal growth, right? That's how I read the book. It's personal growth. We could put it into a leadership construct, but if we want to develop a personal style, we need to we need to understand who we are. Yeah. And
thank you for pointing that out, because I didn't see that when I wrote the 4 quadrants at all. Oh. It was when my wife looked at it. She said, "Where'd you get this?" And I said, "I made it." And she said, "No, because this is me when I was learning this skill. I went through each of these stages as I was learning to be a homeschooling mom, as I was learning to do these other things." So I thank you for calling that out, because I didn't realize that. I thought it was just how my clients show up as for coaching.
Well, it's a great thing about writing a book, and digressing for a second, is that somebody once, I learned this with my first book, is I had no idea what it was about until people read it and fed back to me what they thought it was about. Or I thought I knew what it was about, but it was actually about something different.
Right.
And so when I was writing my second book, the one before this one that's going to be coming out, somebody said, "Well, what's it about?" And my answer was, "I'll let you know after we publish it and people read it." So,
but I interrupted you. Sorry about that. But it is, that's so true. And I was really glad I had enough musicians in my life that said, or poets that said, "Wait, I don't know what I've written until people feed back to me." And they didn't try to force it, because I would have forced people into saying, "No, this is what I wrote."
Yeah, this is what I wrote. Well, I think it's listening, because increasingly in sales, we all publish content, right? We're posted on LinkedIn and so on. Get it out there, right? Get it out there. If you've got a thought, get it out there. It'll help you clarify your own thoughts when you do that. Okay, so back to personality assessments and assessments in general. Yeah, I got to be honest, I'm not a huge fan.
Okay.
But I think it sort of goes back to your point about how they're used, right? Is oftentimes, I believe, certainly in the sales space, the personality assessments are oversold as being more highly correlative than they are.
Right.
And and you talk about in the book is the science is unclear about assessments in general, being generous.
Yeah, that was really generous.
But they are a data point, though. Right. And I think that's where the importance comes in, right? Is if, as you talk about, is go through this journey, sort of determine who you are and what your style is avail yourself of resources. Now, you may not agree, it may or may not be right, who knows, but get the data point.
Well, and what I love doing on teams is helping just something as simple as DISC. I've been speaking for a long time, and the part that frustrated me the most on these talks was the DISC personality, active, reserve, people, task centered, was what people really resonated with the most. Something that was ancient Greek. It was nothing that I came up with, but what I love doing, even in rooms of 1,000, is getting people to move into those 4 quadrants. But it's more fun when it's small teams and they start seeing. That's why you respond that way. Oh my goodness! And it's just sort of a vote, as long as it stays at that level of a common vocabulary, as opposed to so you can never do sales because you're just way too techie, or you can never do sales because you're an introvert, or.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. This was 4 years ago now. I took one of sort of the major sales personality and aptitude assessment tests. Because the CEO was on the show and wanted me to do it, and I took it and took it online, and he calls me back almost instantly and said, "Whoa. Yeah, are you okay?" I was like, well, "What do you mean?" "Well, were you fooling around when you took this?" I said, "No." "Why?"
Oh, no.
"Oh, your score was so low. I just couldn't believe." It's like, what you're saying is I should have been a shepherd, not a salesperson. Well, yeah, pretty much. So, God. And I took it seriously. I wasn't trying to game it, but I think there are limits to it. But I think things like DISC are a little more simple. They give you a framework to understand yourself. But they're a data point. And especially if you use them for hiring, that's a data point. I resist the ones that make the claim, oh, this person doesn't have the sales gene, right? It's like, how do you know?
I didn't realize that was in our structure. Wow.
Oh no, it's in there somewhere. Yeah, in the double helix.
Right. That's why I always did debate, because I was a salesperson.
Yeah. Well, let's go through your 4 quadrants, though, because you lay it out. It's a fairly easy construct for people to understand. I think this idea of, I said I'm passionate about, is developing your personal style. It sort of talks about how you evolve through these quadrants to develop that. So 4 quadrants, 1 through 4, you can sort of imagine this quadrant on the board. So take us through from 1 to 4.
So the vertical axis is the confidence axis. You start with high confidence and you go down to unsure. And then the horizontal axis is the inputs, external and internal. And the premise that I put in it is most of us are just given the half the map of this personal growth journey or leadership journey. So the first one is external confidence. It's the observed quadrant. You're copying basically what you've seen done. You've seen other people in the construct, or the way I share it, you've seen parents lead, you've seen coaches lead, you've seen teachers lead things. So when somebody gives you something to do, to lead, to have responsibility over, you just do what you've seen done. And with the positive motivational speakers I listened to growing up, they would say, if you're a leader and you turn around and no one's following you, you're just out for a walk. And that
sounds like Earl Nightingale.
It does, doesn't it? So it may have been. So that kind of thing just kind of hits your confidence, and you slide down into quadrant 2, which is where you start exploring. And it's not the exploring that we'll talk about after. It's more the exploring of what's wrong with me. This isn't working. There's a deficit, and I need to fix the deficit. And it's the report card. It's you got an 85. Where's the other 15%? So So that it looks like you're going to say.
But also, as you talk about in the book, though, is when you get to this stage where in quadrant 1 you're copying, and quadrant 2 you want somebody to come in and fix it for you.
Exactly. Yeah. So you go to the guru or the webinar or whatever it is to try to get it fixed, and the doubt keeps growing because you keep seeing that all of the different systems that are supposed to be totally perfect don't fit necessarily for you.
Well, and this really resonated with me because someone, an entrepreneur, had my own business in the last 10 years, really gotten into digital marketing, and I think about all the money I spent as not alone on these digital marketing systems that at heart it was because I had doubts about my own intuition, the reliability of my own intuition about how to do these things, and invariably in all cases I came back to taking learnings but coming up with my own plan.
Well, and that's the gift of doubt.
Exactly.
If you can move from asking the question, what's wrong with me, to what if I were exactly right for this position?
Right.
How would I approach it? And so then you can get the gleanings. Like for me, it was, I share it's getting things done. David Allen's got an amazing system for time management that people seem to, it's almost a cult following for the people that love it.
He's been on the show. Yes.
He's great. I don't do the follow-up well. I don't do the following, reviewing. I love making the list. I love putting stuff on a list I've already done so I can cross it off. But to actually then review all those different files and folders and pages did not work for me. But and so in quadrant 2, the Explorer quadrant, you beat yourself up because you're falling short again. But the gift of doubt, if it's inviting you into looking internally to the other half of the map, that's where you can start saying, oh, I gleaned this from David Allen. And I am so glad I gleaned the task list, project, and what's the next step, because I can just come right up to speed quickly. When I'm on that project, I know the next step. And that's where you start piecing together things in quadrant 3. And as you start doing that in the analyze quadrant, you regain your confidence to quadrant 4, which is, I call the focus quadrant. I hesitated on that because it's not nirvana. We're still on a planet working with people, and we're a person. So it's not that we've got it all figured out.
No.
But you know where the map, you know where to kind of put your feet, where to lean when you have problems that you're facing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I said, I think there's a great construct for people, and I enjoyed reading this, is, quadrant 1, okay, we're sort of copying other people. Quadrant 2, we want somebody to come in and fix it. We still have the doubt. Quadrant 3, we start listening, as you talk, we start listening to our hunches and our intuition, because we should, right? And there's a reason. Intuition is very powerful. And this is where we start figuring out what works for us. So if you're thinking about your journey as a seller, is, you're getting trained in quadrant 1, or you're coming into a new company, learning something new. Yeah, you're going to look and see what you can grab from other people. Quadrant 1, quadrant 2. You may want some training. You want to read a book. Hey, tell me what to do. Quadrant 3, then you start thinking, those aren't really working the way they should. What's missing here? And that missing piece is you, right? The missing piece is you putting yourself here, and not just allocating this responsibility to someone else. And I like the way you sort of wrap it up in quadrant 4. You had a line in the book. You said, you use what others model and teach, and what you know to be true about yourself, which is critical, to lead. But I changed that, which is you use what others model and teach, and what you know to be true about yourself to sell. And this is really the critical thing is, don't sellers. It's just you have to work to become the best version of you. This is it. That's right. Not the best version of what your manager thinks. You're not trying to copy, Jennifer, who's the top seller. You're not trying to copy you're taking what you learn from them, integrating it into you. You're never going to succeed trying to copy someone else.
Well, and one of the things I learned reading your book, your Amp Up Your Sales one, was that it was the follow-up where some people are just, you've probably been inflicted with this follow-up automation thing of, are you still there? It's like they get increasingly irritated that you're not responding to their spam. But the follow-up of continuing to stay in touch. Hey, here's a helpful article. Here's a helpful blog post. Here's something that seems like I came across this. It might meet up with your needs. And that could be much more natural follow-up for somebody who's struggling with I don't like the irritating follow-up stuff. I don't want to be a nudge. I don't want to be that guy or that gal.
Right. Well,
I can
that's
help
doing
her.
it.
I like helping.
Sure, and it's doing it in a way that's congruent with who you are. So, yeah, to me, sales is, you got 4 key attributes you really need to focus on, which is your connection, curiosity, understanding, and generosity. And when you talk about this follow-up, it's really all of those, right? You're integrating all of those into that. You're maintaining the connection. You're trying to build a level of credibility and trust. You're going to do this by, so somebody sort of went silent, or maybe it wasn't the right time for them to engage, and so you want to keep engaged, you want to keep top of mind, is, rather than just send, to your point, mindless sort of, hey, checking in type emails, is anytime you engage with them during that interim period, nurture period, is send them something of value and see if you can engage in a conversation on it. I talked about in the book, I believe, my favorite thing was send somebody an article and an email with a link to an article, a white paper, and say, John, I was thinking about you this morning when I read this article. 2 things in here we should discuss.
Yes.
Can you talk at 9:00 on Tuesday?
And what I liked about the link to the article was the way you shared it, it didn't sound like it was a link to an article with an email sign-up form.
No, it's just
a link to a helpful article.
No gated content you had to sign up. You're already on my list. I don't need to inflict that on you twice.
Right.
But getting back to the quadrant, I think it's just a great way for sellers, anybody, somebody moving into a leadership position, is to think about, how do I put that doubt to work in order to develop confidence? And I'm such a huge believer that confidence as a seller or as a leader only comes when you're doing it in a way that's, I said, an alignment with your character and your values and your beliefs.
I love how you make quadrant 3, bringing yourself to the work. You've got you've got the copying, you've got the people that were the solutions, the formulas, and then you bring yourself to them and make them fit you, as opposed to you trying to force yourself into Jennifer, who's the top seller.
And I think that's the secret of life,
right?
Quite honestly, and look at my own journey in sales. Is from day one, sales training, big company, basically horrified by it, and thinking, I can't be this person. I can't act this way. Some people naturally could be salesy. I'm not a salesy type. But I thought I could still do a good job, but I knew I'd have to forge my own path, right? And I think this is what's really incumbent upon people that want to have a career in any discipline. Is there are guardrails, there are best practices, there are processes you sort of have to adhere to, but within that process you need to find you and bring you to the game, because it's when you bring you is when your odds of success and developing the confidence go much higher.
Well, and that's why I think the gift of sales is that it's fine-tuned to help you get freed of all the stuff that really binds you because you're putting yourself out there every day, and you're facing rejection and you're getting scrutinized. And so if you're able to see that it's bringing you and allowing you to become more you, that may be a more redemptive part of the grind, because sometimes it is a grind. Sometimes
absolutely. It's a hard job.
Yeah.
And
I'm still 25 years into this. I get call reluctance, which blows my mind, because I do call training, but that's why I batch them into 5 or 10 or 15, because the momentum for the first 2, it takes a lot to get going. And, all the basics, but
I think it's true of everybody, right? It's and that's why you do that discipline of blocking it together and building up. But I was thinking too about, sort of related to this, about bringing yourself to it, as you talk about writing the history of the future, which I thought in terms of goal setting is something people need to really think about, right? Because I think it's a really important thing is if you're a seller, or you're a new sales manager, or even you've been at it for a while, I term it different. I said, what's your vision of success, right?
Nice.
So what's your personal vision of success look like? In a 3-year term or a 6-year or 10-year, but just write it down. Understand where it is today and see what that gap is between where you want to be and where you are. And then you can identify what the challenges are that are preventing you from getting where you want to go and address them.
And in your life too, in the context
Sure.
of bringing yourself to it. I remember doing that in my 20s because of my weird upbringing. I did it in my 20s. I wrote my I wrote my eulogy, and I realized I want my kids to know that I love them, but my going off to the office to provide for them doesn't communicate love in a way that they necessarily understand. And I was because of my weird upbringing too, I was very clear on I never wanted to say I have to go to work. I always wanted to say I get to go to work. Because I could choose to work somewhere else. If it were a place I didn't want to be, I could choose to work somewhere else. So I tried to be
that's interesting. Yeah.
And very helping my kids realize work is part of what we do as human beings on the planet. But I realized that my going away doesn't necessarily communicate love to them. So I had to choose other ways. But it was because I wrote it out that I was realizing, oh, here's a possible gap. So what are things I can be doing? Jury's out. The oldest is 21, youngest is 16. So we'll find out in about 20 years how well.
Give yourself more than 20. Give yourself 30.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I like them all, but I don't know if they're how infatuated with their parenting, their upbringing they've been.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. I tell my kids, I said, you have the relationship with your parents that you want. and I think it's true. We don't talk about parenting too often, though we've talked about more on the show than I think I have over 900 episodes. But
well, then in the vein of that, the thing you said earlier was I called my dad up, and at one point I said, "You were just making this up as you were going along, weren't you?"
Oh shit, yeah.
Yeah, I really thought he was I thought he had all the answers. I thought he knew what he was doing, and then about in my mid-40s, I realized, oh, I'm at where he was when he looked like he had it all together. He was just trying to figure this out too. He started laughing. He loved it. That's life, Mark.
Oh yeah. I think about in the case of my parents is I'm the youngest of four. My dad was in World War II, navigator on a bomber in the Pacific, and comes home, I think in 46, 47, 46, end of 46, 47, he's in grad school, married to my mom. 48, the first of four kids shows up. So he has four kids within 7 years. Yeah, my parents basically were four kids by 30, just starting the career.
Wow.
and my oldest brother had polio, so he needed intensive medical care during this period. I was the proverbial accident, because I came after he unfortunately contracted polio. But yeah, they figured it out. Yes. Right? They figured it out. To your point, is they figured it out. They listened to their intuition. I don't know I doubt if my parents were reading parenting books. I'm sure they didn't read Benjamin Spock. But I'm sure their parents, were full of wisdom. But they. And this, I think, is part about being yourself, is you don't have to be fully formed to have intuition about what it is you should be doing. And I think this is, for sellers, is such an important lesson, is that you got to think, well, I have to have a certain amount of experience to sort of have the right to express an opinion about, how I should be doing things. And I just don't think that's the case.
Well, I think that's where it's for people that aren't in the senior leadership that are thinking about this personal growth journey. It's choosing where you can have the beta testing of what's your own style in whatever little sphere of influence you have. So I wouldn't do a fanfare, balloon drop and confetti of, hey, I'm going to do this new thing. I'm going to trust my intuition. But it's just, baby stepping, sort of trying to test out little things. Experimenting, exactly, and realizing I might be wrong. It's okay to be wrong too.
Yeah, well, as listeners know, I'm a huge fan of Ralph Waldo Emerson and the Transcendentalists and so on, that school of thought. But famous quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, which is, all life is an experiment. The more experiments, the better. And it's exactly the approach you should be taking in life.
That is so true.
Yeah, I mean, you can read a book, but it's not the story. It's not your story they're talking about. So it's a story. So, and I think this is, again, I urge sellers, if you're newer in your career and you're trying to figure this whole thing out, experiment, and then understand that your story is going to be different. So you have to find your story. How are you going to succeed in this business that's tough, that's hard, that's demanding, that's full of stress and pressure? How are you going to adapt to it, be resilient? What are you going to do that's uniquely you, that differentiates you from everybody else that's out there? Because we are all unique individuals.
To your point too, that from previous episodes, if you're overseeing them, how can you kind of create that? If you're overseeing new sellers, how can you create that sort of buffer or protection to allow in safe ways people to try to explore, which I would call coaching?
Right.
How can you help coaching, help coach people and ask the right questions instead of just demanding things? But it's a tough role because you still have people above you usually that
With
are
expectations.
You have huge expectations on you. Yeah. So.
Well, as I say, it takes courage with a small c. And that's what you expect of coaches, I believe, is expectation with coaches is how do you provide some of that shelter? How do you push back on people that are pushing on you, just as you expect your sellers to push back a little bit on you on the things. When I coach somebody, I don't want them to accept everything I suggest or any recommendation I'd make No, I want them to take it in and go think about it and say, well, how can I integrate this into who I am? If someone's just saying, yeah, it's like, no, you're not getting the point. This is my perspective. And if you just accept it, that's dangerous. Yeah. So, all right, Marc, unfortunately, we're running out of time. But and we didn't even talk that much about your book, but it was a great conversation. This often happens on the show as we get going. But Marc's book, which I enjoyed reading, The Surprising Gift of Doubt, Use Uncertainty, Become the Exceptional Leader You're Meant to Be. We talked about the basic four-quadrant structure. I think for everybody that's really valuable. People want to connect with you. What's the best way to do that?
I'm Marc A Pitman on Twitter and on LinkedIn. So Marc with a C, Pitman with one T. Those are probably the best ones. And the initial A, right? And so it looks like Marc A Pitman on Twitter, but it's not. Or ConcordLeadershipGroup.com, Concord with a D.
All right. Marc, it's been a pleasure.
It's been a real pleasure. Thanks, Andy.
All right. We'll do it again.
Okay.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm so grateful for your support of this show. And I want to thank my guest today, Marc A Pitman, for sharing his insights with us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can do all that on your phone in less than a minute as soon as this episode is over. So thank you for your help with that. And as always, thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Hi, friends. I have something really exciting to share with you. We're launching a new podcast called the RevOps Podcast as part of the ringDNA podcast family. Today's leading B2B companies are embracing revenue operations as the answer to misaligned people, processes, and data that lead to recurring sales inefficiencies. However, many people still have critical questions about RevOps. What processes and tools do I need? How do I structure my team? How do I measure outcomes across sales, marketing, and customer success? And what are the best practices for doing that? So join Jordan Henderson, Jonathan Stevens, and Brandon Redlinger, and some of the world's leading revenue operations leaders as they tackle the important questions many of you face today when building a RevOps function. From ringDNA, the company that transforms sales teams into high-performing revenue drivers, comes a podcast guaranteed to go beneath the surface-level conversations and dive deep into the world of RevOps. Your hosts deliver unfiltered, thought-provoking discussions and actionable takeaways on every episode about the ideas, processes, and technology changing the B2B sales landscape. Visit ringdna.com/RevOps to learn more or subscribe now on your favorite podcast player. What if your sales team could know the moment a buyer arrives on your website and talk with them instantly? With Qualified's conversational sales and marketing platform purpose-built for Salesforce, that's all possible. It's not rocket science, it's common sense. Conversations move deals forward. Live chat, voice calls, and meeting bookers accelerate sales conversations without a single email exchange. Capture prospects in that magic moment when they're most interested in learning about your business. Head on over to qualified.com to chat with their team and learn more.